pleasure this morning to be here with the distinguished commercial attorney, Alan Lentz. We're here for the Nashville Bar Association and its oral history project done by the Historical Committee. Alan, good morning.
Good morning, Garrett. Good to be here.
Can you tell us right off from the start where you were born and what year, please, sir, and your full name?
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, September 29, 1946. Full name, Alan Davis Lentz.
And I think it's no surprise to other attorneys here in town that your dad was a well-known jurist here in town.
He was. He was the Chancellor of Part 1 Chancery Court for about 17 years.
And to take the family history back a little bit further, your grandfather also was well known in town. Could you tell us about that, please?
Well, my father's father was Dr. John J. Lentz, who was the Director of Public Health for, almost 50 years. And the Lentz Public Health Center is named for him.
Tell us a little bit about your dad, what his history was, where he had lived, and how he came to be in Nashville.
He was born in Columbia, moved as a child to St. Petersburg, where his aunt and uncle took care of him during the early years. Then he moved back to Nashville to go to Vanderbilt University and Vanderbilt Law School.
And then after law school, did he practice before he became chancellor?
Yes, he practiced law with Martin and Cochran, and he was also, for a while, an assistant district attorney general.
And his years as when Ned Lentz was the chancellor of Part 1, I believe, were about 1957 through 1972.
That's about right. Yeah.
Did he retire in 1972?
He did. He had had polio when he was a child, so he was bilaterally paralyzed. And it grew more and more difficult for him to get around. And he had a German Shepherd dog and was sitting with the dog in the backyard one morning, the dog on a leash, and the dog saw something and took off and drug Dad down the driveway. And so that made a bad situation worse. So he retired shortly after that.
Let's take a moment and talk about your mom. Tell us her full name and about her.
Frances Rodenhauser, a native Nashvilleian. She was valedictorian at Hugh Law. She was valedictorian in the Lady of the Bracelet at Vanderbilt, and then went on to Vanderbilt Graduate School in French. She made 1B all the way through Vanderbilt, and I never heard the end of that 1B. She also, in later years, taught Latin part-time at MBA, where I went to high school.
I remember the name well. I think that Miss Sims was my teacher in Latin, but I think I remember your mom taught there.
I had Mrs. Sims as well.
I'm presuming that because of your mom and her academic abilities, that rubbed off on you.
I don't know that it rubbed off, but she forced it on me. One of my favorite stories of her was I struggled with chemistry, and I brought home a midterm exam. I got an 89, and I was so proud of it. And I said, Mom, look, I got an 89 on my midterm chemistry exam. And she looked at me and said, where are those other 11 points? But it was a good thing.
Tell me about your Sims.
Older brother, 4 years older, John, went to Vanderbilt Law School. He was a lawyer at Martin and Cochran as well, as my dad was. My sister, Eleanor, went to Vanderbilt. Then she later went to the University of Memphis Law School, got her JD, and then got a CPA certificate. So she's back living in Nashville.
And John lives here also.
John lives here and he's retired.
What about the family home place? Where was that located as you grew up?
I grew up on Page Road, not far from Percy Warner Park. It was terrific. We had a side yard. We had a big trampoline in the side yard. So all the neighborhood kids would convene to jump on the trampoline, play Commodore Cadet football in the side yard.
And I know from my wife that you went to Palmer School.
Did. It's a great school.
How about your grade school experience? Tell us a little bit about that, what you did, how things went.
It was terrific. Palmer was a great school, great teachers, great environment. It made you want to go to school every day. I enjoyed it thoroughly. My first summer job when I was 12 was a counselor at Palmer School summer day camp.
Did you play any sports?
Yes, played all sports. I think in 1959, our Nashville League baseball team, city champions. We played at Sulphurdale, and I was the catcher. It was terrific.
What team was that?
Caldwell Shell.
I remember.
Caldwell Shell was located on the corner of Woodlawn Boulevard and Party Road.
Oh yeah.
And it was the sponsor of our team.
How about basketball?
I did basketball too. At NBA, I think my ninth grade at NBA, I was all mid-state tournament in basketball. Not all mid-state, all-state tournament. But of course, I stopped growing, and then I had a knee injury in football. No more athletics for me.
Yeah. I remember that you and I went to NBA. I was a couple of years earlier than you. Was there ever any question about your going to NBA?
No, not at all.
And I take it your mom probably had a great deal to do with that?
I don't recall that, but I recall being told where I was going to go. And that was fine.
And what year was it that you began in NBA?
I began in the 8th grade. A lot of guys started in the 7th grade. I started in the 8th grade.
Tell us about NBA. What it was like to kind of get used to the school, what the school was like.
It was terrific. It was rigid. Dr. Carter was the head of school, and he was terrific. His wife, Carrie Carter, one of my favorite teachers, taught ancient Rome and ancient Greek civilization. Dr. Carter taught advanced placement history. The school was absolutely terrific. I loved everything about it.
Did you have any trouble adjusting?
No.
Tell us about some of your best experiences and your worst experiences in NBA.
I think the best experiences was making lifelong friends. And that's hard to beat. Probably the worst experience when I was maybe in the 9th grade, I was on the varsity football team, and a tackle fell on my knee and snapped my medial collateral ligament in two. And I was operated on the next day, and the operation did not work. And so that ended my athletic career.
Did you play any tennis at NBA?
Not at NBA. No, with the knee injury, the doc told me I could walk across the street and blow my knee out, so I had to be very careful.
Did you ever have to go on Saturday to ride the Merritts?
Only once. Our senior year prank was several of us took Mr. Poston's English teacher's old VW Beetle, got it out in gear, put it in neutral, and pushed it, and to some extent carried it up to the big study hall and put it up on the part of the study hall where the two doors could be. And Coach Owen caught us doing it, rolling the Merritts, but it was working.
Well, I think you got off light.
It didn't bother Mr. Poston at all.
Alan, can you gauge sort of what impact NBA, the experience of your years at NBA had on the rest of your life?
Well, NBA was all about being a gentleman, an athlete, and a scholar. And one of the first things I remember was on every test, he wrote in handwriting, "On my honor as a gentleman, I have neither given nor received help on this test. Sign your name." And that sunk in at an early age. That was very important to me.
What were your summers like during high school?
I worked.
Tell us about it.
I worked. Well, the first summer was at Farmer School day camp. I worked as a copy boy at the Nashville Banner when I was, I think, 13. Got donuts from Mr. Steele every morning. I worked in the traffic violations bureau of Judge Dennis Summers. I even called the docket some summers in traffic violations. I worked in the registrar's office for 2 summers. I worked for George Rooker, great guy, in the circuit court clerk's office 1 summer. So during MBA, that's kind of what I did during the summers.
Were there other Nashville attorneys that are practicing or have practiced during your career that went to MBA with you?
Oh, yeah, many. You, for example.
You graduated, I believe, in May of 1964.
Correct.
What was in store for young Alan Lentz?
Vanderbilt University.
Was there ever any question?
There was never any question. My mother had gone there, my dad had gone there, my brother had gone there, my sister had gone there, my aunts and uncles had gone there.
Where did you live in your freshman year? Did you live on campus or at home?
Freshman year, I lived at home. And then I moved to the Americana Apartments, 1906 South Street.
I remember them.
Yes, 8 stories. There was a swimming pool on the top. It really wasn't conducive to studying very hard, but it was great.
How did you get along at Vandy?
Undergraduate school was a place I wanted to get out of. I didn't enjoy it that much. Some of the classes just didn't interest me at all. Others were terrific. Your dad taught Shakespeare. And I think he taught maybe Chaucer, classical Old English. One of my role models in life was my ethics professor, philosophy professor, John Locke, who taught me my first year and taught every year thereafter. And to this day, is still a very close friend of mine, Dr. John Locke. He's terrific.
Well, that's wonderful to have made a connection with a professor way back in college and kept up with him.
His specialty was ethics, and that really interested me. A lot more than using a slide rule here.
What was your major?
English,
Minor?
philosophy.
How about social life at Vandy?
It was terrific. There were fraternities and sororities on campus. I was a Phi Delta Beta.
Well, of course, you were from Nashville.
I followed Joe Binkley and Bill Lozier and guys like that. And it was terrific. Made friends, had fun. That was the best part of undergraduate school, actually. Played a lot of ping pong.
Did you do any, extracurricular activities while you were an undergraduate at Vanderbilt? Anything like that?
Play ping pong was about it. I don't remember it.
An experience I had was that I didn't study much the first year and a half because MBA had been such a good preparation.
Really, especially in English. First semester English was just, didn't have to crack it.
How about your summers in between your years at Vanderbilt? What did you do?
Well, again, I worked. I worked in the court system. I had a great summer being a manual laborer for Oman Construction Company. That was hard work. I made $2.62.5 an hour and thought I'd hit the jackpot.
Where were you working? What did you
All
do?
over town.
Okay.
All over town. Had some experiences that sometimes I'll still wake up at night and think about it. Probably the most interesting job was, I was in pre-med rather than pre-law. And through my grandfather, the director of public health, I got a job as a scrub nurse at Nashville General Hospital. And so I reported for duty, and they had me stand and watch surgery for 2 weeks. And then they said, you scrub. And I scrubbed on major procedures for the entire summer. And just because my uncle was in residency at the time, and because of my granddad, all the Vanderbilt residents knew my name. And they had me doing things that you would never, ever want an untrained person to do.
What an experience. What effect did it have on you and your thoughts about the future?
I shifted to pre-walk. It frightened me a little bit to be doing things that I was totally untrained to do. I watched other people do them, and then when it was my turn to do it, I had to rely on what I had observed. And when you have somebody's life in your hands, it's a little daunting. I'm glad I did it.
How were your grades at Vanderbilt? Were they as good as they were at MBA?
No, they weren't as good because I wasn't as interested in undergraduate school as I had been in MBA. I wanted to get out of undergraduate and go to graduate.
Was Vanderbilt sort of Nashville-centric at that time?
Very much so.
Did you notice, or have you noticed changes there?
A remarkable change.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's not Nashville-centric anymore. Sometimes I hear difficult for Nashville people to get in Vanderbilt because they want a diverse student body from all over the world. And of course, the cost of going to Vanderbilt now is pretty amazing. But I still keep up with Vanderbilt. I do the class captain fundraising for my law school, as I do for MBA, in fact. So I keep up with people at the law school because of the fundraising.
So as you approached graduation, I take it you had decided not to go into medicine.
Correct.
And what plans did you make?
I didn't make any plans. My father was a lawyer. My brother was a lawyer. So I was an English major, philosophy minor, so I went to law school.
At Vanderbilt?
At Vanderbilt.
And tell us about the law school experience. It takes some time. But tell us sort of what your experience was, the people that you really liked at law school in terms of professors.
Probably the most interesting experience was maybe about 2 weeks into our first year. There was a 10-minute break before a criminal law class. And there were like 100 students who were milling about in the central hallway. There were 4 women in our class, and one of the women screamed bloody murder. And one of the other classmates, you saw him falling with blood on his belly and a knife. And then one of the other students took off toward the divinity school. What?
This happened at law school?
Yeah, 10 minutes before the criminal law class was to start.
In the hallway?
In the big central hallway before the 2 main conference rooms. And so 3 of us took off toward the divinity school after the guy, the perp guy. He wasn't very fast. We caught him, tackled him. I remember, like it was yesterday, landing in an azalea bush. I know you love azaleas. Caught him, tugged him back into law school, walked in the door. Sirens were coming. You could hear the sirens coming, ambulance, the police. Walked in the door, and there was Jerry Turner, who had been stabbed, standing there talking with a bunch of people, one of them being the young woman who screamed bloody murder. It was a fake. Dr. Wharton had put everybody up to it.
It was a Carl Wharton special.
It was the last year he ever did it, I was told, because Chancellor Hurd got a little irritated that the ambulance came. So Dr. Wharton broke us up into prosecution, defense, and witnesses. And the most interesting thing I learned from the experience was that we had maybe 10 people who had seen it happen. And there were 10 different stories about what had happened. And that was the lesson we learned.
Yeah, and I think that's why he staged those events. He had staged a fight in the classroom that year.
Yep.
And that was exactly the point. Everyone saw something different.
Yep. I enjoyed the experience of being taught by Tom McCoy. He was a terrific professor. Bob Covington was a terrific professor. I have John Beasley, I think, to thank for getting me in law school. He supported me.
He was the admissions director.
He was. If he was not the director, he had a lot of influence. The first year and a half, I thought was very, very difficult. I struggled, especially the third semester. Wasn't having a good time at all. But the last 3 semesters, it was great. You kind of learned the ropes. You were taking classes that you liked instead of tax and uniform commercial code. And so the last year and a half was really, really good.
You know, it's odd that you said what you just said about tax in the UCC, because you ended up being basically a commercial specialist.
Well, I do business law, but I have UCC experts and tax experts that I rely on. I know enough not to drill too deep into it myself.
Who were some of your close friends that you went to law school with?
Bill Browder, lifelong friend, went to NBA, and he went to the University of Virginia. He and I are still friends. He went on to be an assistant U.S. attorney in Portland, Maine. Roger May, a lawyer in this town.
Oh, yes.
Everybody knows Roger. He and I are still to this day very close. Had a couple of my friends who went on to be alcoholics and just fell apart. And that was sad to see that.
I think we all have had experiences that are similar to that. What was your take, both from the 3 years you spent in law school and what you've seen staying in Nashville, about Vanderbilt? Was it in transition at that time? What would you say?
Not at that time. It's the last 15 years I've seen a huge change. Maybe the last 20 years.
What was your most, I would say, your favorite class?
Ethics under Tom McCoy.
Your worst class, the nightmare.
UCC under Harold Bigham, who later became one of my law partners.
During the summer, Alan, did you do lawyer-like things while you were in law school?
Worked for George Rooker and register deeds, things like that.
I take it that these were jobs that had a legal aspect to them.
They did, but also I mentioned working for Oman Construction Company. Also worked in the computer department of Life and Casualty Insurance Company. Back then, the computer department took up an entire floor, and there were these huge banks of computers. It was, back then it was like the space age, and today it was like the Stone Age. But that was an interesting experience.
What about as you went through law school, did you think about what type of practice you wanted to have, or were you just open to anything?
I knew I didn't want to do tax at UCC, Garrett. Other than that, I was pretty open.
All right, you graduated, I think, in May of '68.
71.
71. Okay, that's right. You had graduated from undergraduate school in May of '68. And what was it? What did you go through in terms of finding a job, looking around?
Well, my father at the time was the Chancellor of Part 1 Chancery Court. His predecessor on the bench was Thomas Wardlaw Steele. My father told me that the best lawyer that ever practiced before him was Thomas Wardlaw Steele. And he said, I want you to work for him. And so I interviewed with him and Val Sanford. And they gave me a job, and I'm still there.
The rest is history. What was the name of the firm at that time?
It was Gullett, Steele, Sanford, Robinson, and Merritt. And our offices were on the 23rd floor of the Life and Casualty Tower. My office was right next to Gil Merritt. And I thought I had hit a home run. I felt terrific.
You were in the tallest building in Nashville.
Yeah, I looked out over the river to see the barges get launched. It was great. Saw a tornado from the 23rd floor. It was interesting.
It might be interesting as a historical matter to tell a little bit about what the LNC layout was and what the offices were like.
Well, it was a terrible layout. It was terribly inefficient. You wouldn't possibly do it again. It was basically Y-shaped with a lawyer's lounge in the middle. And the associates couldn't go in the partner's lounge. Only the partners could go in.
How things have changed.
How things have changed. The lawyers' offices the walls were metal. You could, like aluminum walls. But Judge Steele had a beautiful office with wood paneling. Gorgeous. I mean, you went in there and you knew you were in a special lawyer's office.
Take us back to your first years and let's just take a minute and profile the partners that you worked with as a young lawyer in the early 70s.
Well, B.B. Gullett was the patriarch of the firm. B was a lobbyist, a man with some political power, very colorful, traveled a lot, told great stories. Thomas Wardlaw Steele was a trial lawyer, brilliant, laser beam for a mind, incisive. Gee, you wanted to grow up and be like Thomas Steele. Val Sanford was wickedly smart, just brilliant. Very hard for me to work with him because he was kind of on a different intellectual level than I. We got along fine, but boy, he was so smart.
I knew Val and practiced with him for a while, but my understanding was that he was a leading attorney in Tennessee on the Constitution.
Yes, he drafted the legislation on interest rates. He could do anything. Jack Wright Robinson, who really became my mentor, the lawyer I looked up to more than anyone else. Just, you can have a better person than Jack Robinson. Gil Merritt, got interested in politics being around Gil. You'd have John J. Hooker and others, Floyd Kephart and others around. Fascinating. There was a lawyer there named Murray Milligan. There was a lawyer named Oliver Dickens. They didn't last long.
Yeah.
And then later on, Len Todd, who had been a friend of mine since grade school, became a lawyer at the firm. Kenny Campbell was a great lawyer at the firm. Had some terrific lawyers.
What were the main areas of practice at the firm in the early days, let's say during the 70s?
A lot of litigation. Tom just attracted clients because of his brilliance. And then there was a lot of, if you will, constitutional, legal opinions that Val would do. B would do the politics. Got everybody, and of course Jack had been Senator Gore's, his chief of staff, and was Senator Gore's lawyer. So politics really permeated, Democratic politics, not Republican, permeated the firm early on.
Did Jack Robinson have an area of the law that he sort of specialized in?
It was the doggonest thing. Jack specialized in estate trust work, and he still is, I guess, the co-author of Pritchard's on Wills and Estates. But Jack could do it all. He did business work. He could do tax work. He could do loan work for Home Federal, which was our biggest client, Jack did everything.
In terms of growth, could you give take a minute and give us a little history, because I know you've played a great part in getting attorneys to the firm, and tell what's now Gullett, Sanford, Robinson, and Martin, what the history is.
Well, the history again started with really Gullett White, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Tennessee, Harry Phillips, Chief Justice, Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the two of them with Val, Tom, Steele, Jack, they were the founders. And really, they set a tone, especially Jack and Val set a tone that a lawyer in Gullett, Sanford had to understand and practice professionalism every day. You had to understand the ethics of the business. You had to give it your best. It was a place where they were proud to be and you were proud to be. It brought out the best in you. Some people couldn't make it, and they went on. But Jack really was the role model for me, and not only in my practice, but also when the time would come for us to hire another lawyer. I would kind of put myself in Jack's seat and say, "Oh, Jack, think about that."
During the 1970s, I think the firm averaged in terms of attorneys maybe 10.
Not 9 or 10, actually.
Right.
There were people that came and went.
Did you reach a point where things began to change?
Well, I think change came slowly to the firm. I think as long ago as 15 years ago, I heard the firm described as being hidebound, kind of set in its ways. And I think the firm realized that. And we looked for people who weren't necessarily, looked for lawyers who weren't necessarily just like ourselves, but lawyers who brought a new dimension to the firm. We were very alert to spot lawyers that we thought were superstars. And we brought in the Martin and Cochran lawyers, Brady's, Tom Forrester, just great people. We brought in...
What dimension did that bring to the firm that had not been there before, and when did it happen?
Martin and Cochran probably in '85, and the dimension it brought basically was insolvency. Ray and Tom and Mike, really specialists in insolvency work. And then the following year, I believe it was, Gareth Aiden and Scott Derrick came over, and they brought, Scott brought litigation muscle and experience and smarts at a younger age than Val and others.
So the second half of the 1980s began to have growth and also change.
Yes, and there was change in that our biggest client from the get-go, for my years there, was Home Federal Savings and Loan, which later became Metropolitan Savings and Loan. And it was by far our largest client. And during one of those bleak periods of the economy, the RTC and the OTS concluded that Metropolitan Federal's properties that it had liens on were not worth pennies on the dollar of loans, and closed the institution. And so we lost our biggest client, and the subject of one of the objects of an ongoing investigation by the RTC and OTS over whether or not we had any culpability in the failure of
This is the type of thing that could be a death blow to a law firm.
There were some very bleak days. There really, really were. But there were people that stood straight up beside us. People like Roger May. And we came through it without a single criticized file. Not one. Every file we owned for net fit was studied by the regulators, and not one was criticized.
How did the firm, insofar as its business and what the lawyers did, having lost or losing your number one client in terms of income, what was the reaction?
There were some bleak days, but we realized we had a job to do. And we undertook proactive efforts to broaden our practice. One of the most interesting things to me was that a number of the lenders from Metropolitan Federal, after they lost a job, went to other lending institutions and became and when they went to, say, back in First American, all of a sudden we had First American as a client. And so there was the seeding of the metropolitan lenders that really was a great help in keeping our practice, certainly our commercial lending and real estate practice alive.
Who at the firm sort of began being the leader of the title, closing, and property section?
That was a very, very important section of the firm when I started. Too important. Nobody wanted to do it. It wasn't a terrifically exciting aspect of law. So Murray Milligan did it for years. Jack tolerated it for years. I was involved for many years. I searched titles. In the mornings of my first 5 years of practice, I searched titles. I would go to the John Cobb's attorney's title company, look through the card files, go to the registrar's office, or Felix Wilson, and these enormous books you'd have to pull up and open. But in later years, Wesley Turner, man, could not have a better partner than Wes Turner. He took over that practice and is still doing a great job today.
And who else has joined the firm that works with Wes now in the property division?
Well, Kathy Gwynn is active in it, and she's, again, wonderful to work with. Heather Derrick, Scott's daughter, works in property. And Lisa Wyshynski has joined her to do property and business work. We still have a very, very active commercial. We had an active residential closing practice. George Crawford ran that. But commercial lending is really the bread and butter.
And George, I believe, retired 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes. George's first wife was deceased, was my first cousin, Judy Rodenhauser.
Tell us about Joe Martin. When Joe came with the firm and what his specialty was.
Joe came to the firm with the Martin and Cochran merger. His specialty, I believe, was employment law. He was a man who knew how to find an answer to any question. You always see him with books splayed open. You could go to him to answer any question you had. And if he didn't know it off the top of his head, about 2 hours later, you'd see him walking down the hall with a book in his hand. I found this case. So he was a wonderful resource for the younger lawyers. And again, a man of great professionalism. He really stood out in the crowd. Great guy.
No, B. Gullett passed away a number of years ago and had actually retired prior to that. What did the Gullett Sanford firm do in terms of sort of keeping their finger in the political arena and the law of legislation, things like that, public law?
Well, we did see a gap when B started declining. And we, after a lot of deliberation, we hired a lobbyist, Dan Haskell. We hired another lobbyist who has since gone on to Vanderbilt, Matt Scanlon. We got involved in alcoholic beverage licensing by hiring the former acting head of the ABC, Jimmy Winkley, and Jimmy Burrell. So we have kept in tune with the legislature without, frankly, getting too close to it. You read the headlines today, you're glad you're not too close to it.
And I think that Dan Haskell played a great part in a number of liquor-related pieces of legislation, one having to do with grocery stores.
Liquor and grocery stores, Dan was very active in that. And it was interesting to me because at the time, my biggest client was what was B&G Wholesalers, which changed its name to Horizon Wine and Spirits, which changed its name to Empire Distributing, which was the largest liquor distributorship in the state. So that was a great client. Tommy Bernard, who owned it, I'd go out and visit Tommy and we'd work on a matter, and he said, "Come out to the warehouse with me." And we'd walk into this huge warehouse, conveyor belts and all. He'd walk down the rows, and he'd pull a bottle of wine, and pull a bottle of whiskey, pull a bottle of wine. "Here, try these, tell me how you like it."
Have we pretty much covered the story of the growth and the development of Gullett Sanford as it is today? I think we have some new lawyers in litigation you might want to mention.
We have new lawyers in litigation. We have a very strong practice in employment. Chris Cardwell, Mary Taylor Gallagher. We commercial law with companies, representing companies like CSX, whom you well know, and knew basically. We've diversified we have lawyers now who are African American, which has been wonderful for the firm, terrific lawyers. So I think that's, I played a part in certainly one of those, and I'm just really proud and pleased with it. It's the right thing to do. And for us, it was the perfect thing to do.
Before we talk about your own practice and your clients, I want to ask you a few more questions about the firm development. And that is, tell us about the history of the leadership in the firm from the 1970s up to present.
B Gullett was the outspoken head, but actually he was more of a figurehead. Tom was kind of the leader of the firm because of the force of personality. Val was the manager of the firm in a very quiet way. And gradually Jack took over the management of the firm for many, many, many years. But again, his style of leadership was quiet, and he didn't have to thump his chest or pound on the table. He had a leadership style that everyone appreciated and loved. Very effective.
Very thoughtful.
Very thoughtful.
How did that change?
Just as Vanderbilt has become less insular, the law firm changed too. I think we tried to kind of branch out and not be hidebound or insular in our hiring and proactively going after certain areas of practice. I think, maybe jumping ahead a little too far, I think the move from 234th Avenue North, the old Net Fed building, to what was then the Regents Bank, was a big move for the firm.
When did that happen? Because I know that when I joined the firm. It was at the Metropolitan Federal Building there on 4th. And I'm trying to recall myself when we made the move to what I knew as the First American Center, but it was then called Regions.
I think it was 03 or 04. The experience with MetFed, all of the firms survived it. That building was old and tired, and I think it kind of drug us a bit, drug us down a bit. And I think moving to new offices in the regions, we had them built out, especially for us. They were nice. And then an even bigger segue came when we moved to the Pinnacle building about in 08, 07 or 08. Again, we built out beautiful offices, and we're still there today. And that kind of made us sit up straight and think more about ourselves and our image. And I think it caused other people in the community to think, well, these guys are maybe not more of them at all. Very positive change.
Let me ask you questions now that center about your own practice, where you started developing clients and the clients that have been a great deal to you in the 40-plus years that you've been.
48.
Yeah.
I started out in the mornings searching titles for MetFed, and in the afternoon it was catch as catch can, mostly for Tom Steele. As time went on, I noticed that Judge Steele had some terrific clients, and Tom was so brilliant, he wasn't terrifically interested in the day-to-day humdrum law practice, which was fine with me. And so through Tom, I got introduced to Steiner Liff, Ira Metal Company, Noah Liff, Mitch McGill. I got introduced to Red Ace Petroleum Company, which morphed into Gasoline Marketers Inc., Delta Marketing Company, Matco, Consumers Gasoline Stations Inc., Bull Market Inc. So, because Tom really wasn't interested in the day-to-day practice, I got the exposure to those clients. And fortunately, they liked me, I liked them. Through Jack, I got exposed to Wallace Brothers Packing Company and Kentucky Sausage Inc. and Wampler Sausage. So I was a meat packing plant lawyer for many years. Just some amazing stories. Amazing stories from meat packing plants. So I segued into business law, I think because Jack sponsored me and because Tom just kind of allowed me to kind of take over that practice.
I think there was one case that ended up being in the newspapers and on TV almost every day.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It was about 1980 or 81. Through Jack, we represented Gresham Smith. Gresham Smith worked very closely with a developer by the name of David Emery. David had put up a number of commercial buildings, and it was terrific. Third National Bank was interested in building a new tower on, like a 4th Church, full-on church in Pitt, basically. And so he made a pitch to Third National chairman to develop this building. And the chairman threw him out of his office. Whereupon, one of the properties that was in the footprint of the bank's new building was the Petway Revis building, a men's store. So, a few months later, title to the Petway Revis building was conveyed to John Noel, trustee. And the bank didn't realize it. And its developer in Houston didn't realize it. And so when they went to buy the Petway Revis property, we were representing David. We said, no, we're not going to sell it. And David was putting up at the time the city center there at 6th Street. And so the bank was understandably aggrieved. And it prevailed upon the metropolitan government to try to condemn the Betway Records. Here was this fine, expensive men's store that the city wanted to condemn because it was blighted. Blighted is a term that's defined in the code as just being deleterious to human health, safety, welfare. So that had to be approved by the Metro Council. Condemnation did. So we had two newspapers in town. One was the Tennessean, Siegenthaler's machine, and by then the Banner was Irby Simpkins' machine. Well, we started a big fight. We're not going to sell it. They came after us to condemn. We fought the condemnation. The Banner was on our side. The Tennessean was on the side of the bank. And so we had a bruising 3 or 4 months of a battle before the council voted it down. And we were on TV every night for about 3 months in the newspaper. It was like 15 minutes of fame here.
How did it resolve after the council decided not to go forward with the condemnation?
Well, in the wisdom of the developer, they were in such a hurry to get the building built that they designed the building, which is now the Fifth Third Center, they designed it around the Petway Reps building. So now when you see that insert in the front facade of the building, that's because of the condemnation battle that they lost. And David, by then, had got City Center off the ground, got the big head start. So he sold the property to them. They had still designed around it.
Wonderful story.
It's that architect would like to have that design back up. It was a good one to have. We had people, I remember distinctly going to the party at Bellevue Country Club, and the party was winding down, and everybody had a few drinks, and some guy came up to me, got in my face, and started chewing me out about not taking care of the local bank. And some other guy saw what was happening, and he came up to the guy who was giving me a hard time and got in his face. And here they were in the rotunda of the club screaming at each other. Whereupon I left. That episode, that entire situation drew a lot of attention.
Well, it's a fascinating part of the history of downtown Nashville, actually, because that's a prominent building.
Really?
And I can't imagine the Betway Rabbits building sitting there on that plaza in front, but it could have happened.
That's what happened.
Where are you sort of today in your practice?
I do business law. I have a number of clients that I've had for many, many, many years. I take care of their families. I'm the trustee on several of their trusts. But I mainly do business law. I'm working very hard now toward transitioning my really special clients to other lawyers within the law firm. I work closely with other lawyers in the firm, and I don't preach or even do much teaching, but I try to mentor them to show them what's important in a matter, how you focus on it, how you handle it, how you handle your relations with other lawyers and your relations with your clients. So instead of really hitting the files every day, I know enough now. If I have a complicated real estate problem, I'll go to Wes Turner or Kathy Quinn. If I have a tax problem, I'll go to Mark Westlake. If I have a litigation problem, I'll go to Scott Gehrig. I enjoy that collegiality. Our firm is known for its collegiality. We, by and large, don't have closed doors. We don't have silos in practice. I like nothing more than having another lawyer in the firm work with me on a file. I find that very rewarding.
Let's take a moment and shift gears a little bit. Tell us about what you do when you're not practicing. Your hobbies, your interests, things you enjoy.
As you know, I enjoy gardening. I'd like to do more of it. It started early on. One of my first memories is I was with my mother at her mother and father's house, and I smelled a pin. And that's the first fragrance I ever remember. And that one experience got me interested in flowers. So I grow a lot of flowers. You probably didn't know this, I collect music. I've got every song that I've ever heard that I like. There are a lot of songs I don't like, so I've got a huge music collection and enjoy that. As you know, I enjoy taking photographs, and frequently I will use software called Photoshop to amend photographs in some very strange ways sometimes.
To the great embarrassment of some of your friends.
Yes, yes. You can personally attest to that.
I have been a victim. How did you get into photography and photoshopping?
My brother was a terrific photographer, still is, but he really didn't get me into it. I got into it because of growing flowers. My sister gave me a Bessler Topcon with a macro lens, and so if I grew a tulip, the one in my office, you see it every day. I would take a close-up shot of the flower. That's how I got into it, basically. In the Photoshop, it was through my son, who is really good at computers, and so he actually does the hands-on initiative, and I'm kind of the artistic director telling him to put Garrett's head on Julie's shoulders and vice versa. So we do that as a team.
Travel. Do you and Liza travel very much?
Not as much as we used to. I used to snow ski a lot. I go to Beaver Creek, Vail, Alton, Snowbird, Aspen, Buttermilk, Snowmass. What we do now is we'll go to Jackson Hole. My best friend since the 8th grade at NBA, he and I are married to sisters. And he and his wife moved to Jackson Hole, built their dream home. And so we go to Jackson Hole probably once a year. We go to Scottsdale, Arizona, probably once every other year, in Tucson too. My best friend, fraternity brother in college, built his dream home in Scottsdale, which is a great place to go to. And we go to Sanford, Florida, at least once a year.
Your friend, and I guess it would be your brother-in-law, is Hanley Sayers.
Hanley Sayers, yes.
Alan, there's also a rumor that at one time, or maybe just once, you were one of Tennessee's leading backpackers.
I was prevailed on by a senior partner who I looked up to and admired, avid backpacker, to join him in a group in the middle of winter in the Smokies. Garrett don't forgive me for this. So he convinced me to go by telling me two things. Number one, it's mostly all downhill. Number two, it's better than sex. So, believing in my senior partner, I said, I'm gonna go. So it was straight up. Halfway up the mountain, torrential rains hit. Torrential. Had it not been for Scott Garrett pushing me from behind up the mountain, I would still be on the mountain. I lost my sense of humor. Finally made it to the lean-to, erstwhile cabin at the top of the mountain. which we had reserved. And there was a whole bunch of kids dressed in militaristic uniforms. And I, having been the last one of our group to go, I said, what are these people doing here? No, I said, are these girls doing here? I thought they were girls because they had things as their pants hanging from their backs. Whereupon the Royal Rangers from Birmingham, somebody blew a whistle, Rangers, we're out of here. Okay. Finally got to sleep that night. We were in bunks. I was at the top bunk. Here, Scott was over here. Middle of the night, somebody yelled, skunk. I said, what? Alan, you left your food on the floor. And I looked down, and there was the skunk in my backpack. And then Scott woke up, and he said, he was on the top bunk. He said, skunk, I'm out of here. And he rolled off his bed and landed. It sounded like a thump of a watermelon. And he was rolling around. Oh, oh! And people were yelling, skunk, don't move, don't move. And everybody froze. And the last thing we saw, the skunk had a package of Cracker Barrel cheese in his mouth, ambling out of the shelter. So,
And it was nice and warm in the shelter.
it had gone from a torrential tsunami rain to ice, to sleet. And the wind was blowing so hard, there was, I think it's called rime ice, where the ice would be horizontal off of a tree branch. It was just the most horrible weather, horrible experience. But then the next morning, the sun came up, and we hiked down, was it Lake Fontana?
Yes.
And the sun rolling up off the lake. That was nice going. And it was downhill.
The only downhill part.
Yes.
No, it was a great experience, and I'm glad, although I haven't been able to get you to go back, I'm glad you went once.
It was unforgettable. Having done it once, I did not need to do it again. The night of the skunk.
Let's talk a little bit about your family, your wife, and your family life, what folks you do.
Married to Liza Beasley.
Where did you meet Liza?
I met her when she was 13 and I was 22. We were both in the wedding of her sister Lindy and my best friend Hamlin. Her father, Dr. Luther Beasley, was the protege of my grandfather, Dr. Lentz. They were both pediatricians. And so the families had a long connection. And so in 1979, Liza moved to Michigan and then Illinois after graduating from college. She came back to town. So when she came back to town, Lindy and Hamlin said, why don't you go out with Liza? And we did. That was 40 years ago. She started out, she got a master's degree in counseling and human development at Vanderbilt Peabody, and then worked as a counselor at Harding Hall, Harding Academy. She's now doing consulting work for nonprofits like Girl Scouts, Community Foundation, National Public Education Foundation. We have 3 kids. My son went to Harding Academy, MBA, Sewanee, and then he got a master's degree in creative writing from Belmont.
What's his name?
Davis, which is not good. Then he got 6 network engineering certifications and does internet security, or SP++. He's the computer guy. Having had the creative writing aspects, we'll figure that. Middle daughter married Liza, graduated from Harding, Harvard Hall, Webster, then got her master's in psychology from Pepperdine in Los Angeles. She is married to William Bartholomew, the late Sam's nephew, David and Caroline's son, a great guy. They have 3 kids, and so Mary Wisely now lives in Redwood, has 3 kids.
And we can call you Granddaddy.
Granddaddy. My youngest daughter, Ellie, graduated from Harding Academy, University School, Birmingham Southern, and now she is head of corporate sales for the new Hilton in Green Hills, which is a beautiful job. Doing great.
And it makes you feel good to see your children have the success,
Yes.
and the grandchildren also.
Yes, and it makes me feel good that they didn't come out of school with any debt.
You haven't talked much, except in relation to the firm, about politics. Have you been involved?
Not directly. I enjoy politics. I follow it very closely. I've always been, if you will, a yellow dog Democrat. Through Jack and the Gores, Al Gore's losing the presidency was a blow, horrible, horrible blow. But I've always been interested in politics. I've given money behind the scenes in politics. But my experience in the Third National Bank condemnation matter kind of convinced me I wasn't ready to be exposed to public life. There was so much politics involved in that matter that it was pretty disgusting to see legislation being made or not made.
In terms, Alan, of law practice, what are some of the overarching, I guess, lessons you learned during your practice?
Change. It has changed so dramatically, the use of computers. I remember saying, I would see Bob Pope or Joe Martin playing cards on their computers in the 1980s. So I'm not going to do that. So the use of computers is a remarkable change. Another remarkable change to me has been the competition for clients. When I started out, you wouldn't think about coaching another lawyer's client. You wouldn't dream of it. It was unprofessional. You wouldn't dream of advertising. Unprofessional. All of it is morphed. The technology is a blessing and a curse, but it's remarkably changed my practice. We used to interact a lot with other lawyers. You'd go to motion docket on Friday morning, and you'd know almost everybody in the court. With email and the like, you don't talk to people as much as you used to. You don't write like that. I think the draftsmanship has really suffered because of email. So I think it's incumbent on younger lawyers to use technology in a smart way, not to lose sight of the qualities and professionalism that you're known for and not known for.
Do you think the basics of the attorney-client relationship have changed, or are those still basically the same?
In my practice, they're basically the same. I think in other lawyers' practices, probably not. A lot of it, I think, arises from the intense competition for clients. And people are now more exposed. You want a will done, you'll go online to do your will, which is a big mistake. Yeah, the chemistry between the lawyer and the client. Another thing is simply the cost. $400 an hour, there are not a lot of individuals and companies that can pay the top quality lawyers. So it's changing the dynamic. People want you to give them a budget now, but they never used to. Things like that.
Would you recommend law for your children or grandchildren?
Every child is different. It would have been a terrible decision for my son. Would have been a pretty good decision for my middle daughter. Terrible decision for my youngest daughter. I think that had I not had someone like Jack Robinson, now someone like Hal Martin, to be my mentor, I could have ended up flipping hamburgers to Wendy's. I think the law practice, everybody is not cut out for the law practice. I've seen too many friends and people hit the age of 40 and just go to pieces. I think if you go into law, you need to go into it with eyes wide open. It's a very stressful field. People generally don't come to see you unless they've got a problem or an opportunity. But they put a lot of pressure and stress on you. You've got to be prepared psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, professionally to deal with it. And not all people are. So, and they've also got, in addition to being good draftsmen, having writing skills, now they have to have the technological skills. I think the law schools are churning out far too many lawyers. I do the character fitness interviews for bar applicants. And it's really been interesting to me to, if you will, interview each of these young applicants. I do it twice a year. Fascinating. Within an hour interview, you can acquaint them with things that are important, are going to be important to them in their practice. Little things like my mantra is, your calendar is your best friend. Put on your calendar every deadline, every response date, every time you expect something back from your lawyer, put it on your calendar so you can sleep on it. Always be cordial to the young lawyer. What goes around comes around. Think before you click. Be professional. It's not hard to do.
Well, it's been a hallmark of your practice, and I think one of the reasons you have so many good friends in the bar. Alan, it has been a pleasure talking with you about your life and career. Is there anything we've left out?
Oh, I could tell some stories, but probably wouldn't want to hear them. The collegiality of the relationships, the human relationships and collegiality that I've developed as a lawyer is probably the most important aspect to me of my practice. I enjoy people that I come in contact with. I enjoy having people rely on me, count on me to be there. That's very, very rewarding, very important to me. And if you get anything out of law practice, if you walk away from it, as I will soon, it's that feeling that you have really helped people, professional, and you've been friends. A lot of people can't say that.
I want to thank you for taking the time to give your oral history. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gary.